You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for the week of June 28th, 2024. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where we very much agree with the good Dr. Rachel Maddow.
Podcasts are very humbling. They are more difficult than you would think.
It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
For this episode, we broke out 2 coffee cups that have been in storage at our house for a long time.
Very long time.
Our Countdown with Keith Olbermann coffee mug. And our Up with Chris Hayes coffee mug. Hey, cheers, Driftglass.
Cheers to you, Blue Gal. Yeah, those have been gathering dust for quite a long time. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the New York Times article from February that recently resurfaced, and it's about exhaustion. And I will now read to you all. Uncle Driftglass is going to read to you all now from the New York Times. So settle in, get a nice big mug of something cozy, and here goes. The headline is, Anti-Trump Burnout. The Resistance says it's exhausted. Bracing for yet another election against Donald Trump, America's liberals, yes, all of us, Blue Gal, each and every one of us, are feeling the fatigue. We're kind of like crisis out, one Democrat said. Quote, in 2017, they donned pink hats to march on Washington, register their fury with Donald J. Trump by the hundreds of thousands. Then they flipped the House of Republican control for the House of Representatives, won the presidency, and secured a surprisingly strong showing in the 2022 midterm elections, galvanized by their conviction that Mr. Trump and his allies constituted a national emergency. This year, anti-Trump voters are grappling with another powerful sentiment, exhaustion. Some folks are burned out on outrage, said Rebecca Lee Funk, the Washington-based founder of The Outrage, a progressive activism group and purveyor of resistance-era apparel. People are tired. I think last election we were desperate to get Trump out of office, and folks were willing to rally around that singular call to action. And this election feels different. We're kind of like crisis out, said Sharon Kaysbar, 36, a security guard in Pittsburgh who called the prospect of a Trump-Biden rematch a dumpster fire. She added, it's crisis fatigue for sure. Ms. Kaysbar, a Democrat who would back Mr. Biden over Mr. Trump, added, any sense of urgency that we had in the 2020 elections, I think, is still there in the sense that no one wants Trump to be president, at least for Democrats, but it's exhausting, unquote. So, is this true?
Short answer, yes, with an if. Long answer, no, with a but.
This is why today we want to talk about the difference between exhaustion and exasperation and what we mean when we say the resistance. We're sorry that Ms. Rebecca Lee Funk of Washington, D.C., who runs an apparel shop called The Outrage, and I think I might have actually gotten a t-shirt from her once a while ago for the kids. But she's seen a decline in business. And yes, being outraged 100% of the time is unsustainable. And as to Ms. Shannon, her name is Shannon Kaysbar, who called the prospect of a Trump-Biden rematch a dumpster fire, you owe Driftglass $5. He got your name wrong. You used the word dumpster fire. Maybe we call it even, but I still think you owe him $5.
Well, just give me a $5 gift certificate from Outrage. I understand that
the Outrage, yes.
The business.
The article uses the word exhausted 8 times, the word fatigue 4 times, and the phrase burned out 5 times, just based on the number of times I was told how wiped out I should feel. I felt almost obliged to lie down and take a nap.
Yeah.
But before we settle the question of exhaustion, we need to take a step back and discuss what sustains a group of people when the going gets tough, and what breaks that group up when that thing is lost. And the word we came up with is...
We are looking at how to pronounce this word in English, meaning a mutual trust and friendship among people who spend a lot of time together. as a fellowship or companionship or friendship. This is a word that comes from French camaraderie. How do you go about pronouncing it? Camaraderie. 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 Camaraderie.
Weirdly enough, this came up while Driftglass was watching a video about what was happening in the automotive YouTube world.
I confess I'm not a car guy. Never been a car guy. I have never broken down a carburetor. But during the pandemic, I started watching videos by this group called Donut, the Donut Crew. And they have just pure geek energy that I found very exciting and entertaining and reassuring. It was entertaining and it was informative. They do very cool stuff with cars and motorcycles. They also explain like the physics and science behind all kinds of stuff that I find interesting, like combustion or the proprietary alloys used in like racing brakes, which was very interesting. They also tried to see how far they could trick out a Walmart mini bike, and could they get it up to 100 miles an hour? I won't spoil it for you, but they get really close, but didn't quite make it. But then things started to change. I watched a lot of their videos. I really enjoyed what they talked about, but things started to change. There wasn't the same energy. There were a lot of different faces showing up. There was a different focus on things, more commercials, and not the really cool commercials they used to do, which they had written themselves, which I thought were hilarious, and I assumed the sponsors loved them because they kept doing them. And that's when a whole bunch of why I left videos started popping up, and not just for Donut. This was also for a much bigger outfit in the same space called Hoonigan, and for Motor Trend and others.
And the thing they all had in common was a loss of group camaraderie after being bought out by venture capitalists. You can imagine.
Yeah.
Suddenly, these small groups of friends who had built successful companies based on doing what they wanted because it was creative and fun had to start clearing things through new corporate hierarchies. And this is the story of your career over and over again, Driftglass.
It totally is.
So there was office politics. Now, instead of doing sick burnouts in the garage next to your friend who was editing video, there were endless meetings with people in suits about the importance of synergies and increasing profit margins. And did I mention synergies, Driftglass?
Yeah, a lot of synergies in the corporate world, Blue Cow.
The creatives build the business, and the suits take it over and start issuing edicts that drive the creatives nuts. That is not a new story.
No, very, very.
And it's not why the creatives started the business, so sooner or later they walk and start a new thing. This is a classic conflict. It's a variation on how vulture capitalists have nearly killed local newspapers all across the country.
Yeah. In the town where we live, that's what happened to our local paper.
Yeah. These automotive YouTubers weren't making a ton of money. They were crazy long hours because they were perfectionists who cared about what they were creating. Oh, Driftglass.
Do you feel seen, Blue Gal?
You put that in the script to make me cry, didn't you?
That's really, I mean, it's like they know us, Blue Gal.
They know us. They put up with the low pay and long hours and occasional injury and run-ins with the police out of a shared sense of camaraderie, not only with each other, but with their audience. They have a direct connection to their audience.
Absolutely.
That's why their YouTube channels grew so fast. And unfortunately, it was that rapid growth that eventually caught the eye of venture capitalists. I want to add something to this, Driftglass. You and I put our podcast on YouTube. And we did that because 2 or 3 people asked us to. Yeah. So that they could, Chrome stream it through their TVs. And we were glad to do it because people wanted to hear us that way. Yeah. Now we have 1,300 subscribers, which I never thought that we would get that ever. So I decided to see if we could monetize and put ads on our YouTubes. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that, you qualify. You qualify to put ads on YouTube. So I apologize if you're listening to this on YouTube and you have to skip through an ad first. But here's the deal. In order to qualify for YouTube's advertising, you have to have people have listened to your content for a total of 3,000 hours.
Right.
You have to have a threshold of, I forget whether it's 750 or 1,000 subscribers to your channel. Right. And there's a number of other hurdles you have to go through to prove you have any kind of audience that is willing to click on your videos regularly in order to qualify to get advertising. Then if you meet all of those requirements, they say, okay, yeah, we will paste ads at the beginning of your videos. You can decide whether or not you want them in the middle of your videos. And once you've earned $100 of what we at YouTube say you've earned,
Right.
we'll give you a check, or we'll allow you to transfer it to your bank account. Once we're going to hold on to $75, we're going to hold on to $85. We're not going to spend the banking money to transfer money to you until you've earned by our estimation. You have no control over what we're paying you. No say in what we're paying you, and it's not transparent what we're paying you. You just get, once you make $100, we'll start talking about transferring it to you. And so it has really opened my eyes to how YouTubers operate. Now that I'm doing a YouTube podcast, which I never expect to even meet the threshold for monetizing. I don't think I'll ever get 3,000 views, but I know knitting podcasters who do 3-hour live streams once a week. And the reason they do it is to get those hours up.
That's exactly
so
right.
that they can meet that threshold. And there was one, I'm not kidding, that was playing a video game with each other on their phones at the end of their live stream. And I'm like, oh, this isn't knitting. We're watching you guys play a phone game.
Right.
And not to diss anybody. I mean, they're trying to make a living off of this thing. And it's not just, like you said, it's not just these automotive guys. There's a shakeup going on right now. I have noticed podcasters quitting. I've noticed yarn marketers who only sell on the internet saying, I can't do this anymore. I need a paycheck.
Right.
And I think part of it is, and maybe you can answer this because you know a lot about workforce development, Drift Glass. But
I do.
Everybody's working, right?
Right.
The job market is hot. And so teenagers are working. There's this, I saw on, I don't know whether it was Axios or where it was, but the return of the summer job. Good paying summer jobs for teens are a thing now because nobody can hire an adult to do some of these ice cream store and, lifeguard jobs. I mean, they're back, and they had been gone. Summer jobs had been gone for a long time.
Yep.
Because they were picked up by adults who needed work. And now that's not the case. So the fact that I get emails from Springfield Clinic every other day saying, do you want to apply? Do you want to apply? It's like, I know I could do that job. I know I could do intake at Springfield Clinic. It requires a high school education.
Yep.
The first time I have to turn away a patient because they don't have the right insurance, I'm going to go ballistic and I'm going to get fired.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen.
And you know that in advance. Isn't that good?
I
know that about
in
yourself.
advance. I will get fired from that job.
Well, just a brief aside, the summer jobs programs used to be considered security programs.
Yeah.
Public safety programs.
Yeah.
How do we keep the kids off the streets?
Right.
So you'd fund summer jobs programs because
this is why crime is down.
Yeah, because the cops wanted kids away from didn't want them congregating. So you give them jobs, but there was a pot of money. There was always a pot. This is the 70s and 80s. And the number of people I know who, when I worked at the city of Chicago, who got their first job through a summer jobs program with the city of Chicago, which once everything hit the fan, not after the recession, but once things dried up around the 90s and 2000s, suddenly there's no money for a summer job program anymore.
Right.
Coming from the federal government. Now you have to go out and knock doors.
Right.
But now that those are actual jobs, and I think the only way to fix this, Blue Gal, is by deporting 20 or 30 million undocumented refugees, undocumented immigrants. Because then,
when I taught the New Deal, one of the things that came up was this Chicago judge noting that the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC program, which took young men out of their homes, put them to work in the forests.
Yep.
And the money went home to the parents.
Yep.
They got enough money to buy a snack and stuff, and their paycheck went home to their parents.
Right.
And there was a Chicago judge who was quoted saying, "You have just reduced crime in this city by 40%.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. My
Taking
uncle.
young men who have nothing to do and giving them something to do.
My great uncle, I should say, not my great uncle, long since passed, was a CCC guy.
Yeah.
And he built a church and he built paths, and
Well, and there's those WPA roads.
Yeah.
that Mayor Daley, that dumb mayor always talked about in his city council meetings, right?
It taught him a skill. And, they provided the young men outdoors exercise, a roof, and 3 squares a day. And the money went home, and a social life.
That was not crime or a gang.
Right. It was group activity. It was camaraderie. Yeah. It was the people you worked with. And money went back.
So I'm seeing all of these people in various parts of the internet dropping out, part because they can get a good paying job somewhere and they're tired of it. They're tired of going hand to mouth and barely making it, while YouTube says, yeah, we can't give you that till you've earned $100 of what we say we're going to pay you. There was one woman on Instagram talking about, that's Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg isn't hurting, but this woman on Instagram is saying, I'm spending every night this week learning TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm not knitting. I'm not doing my yarn. I'm not dyeing my yarn. I'm not spinning. I'm not doing anything creative that is the purpose and the fun in my energy.
That's right.
The energy going to what I want to do is to share with you my artistry. And I'm spending this week learning TikTok.
Yep.
And we all have learning curves. And yes, we have to do this technology. You and I are both technology people. It's a miracle that we're able to do this podcast. I'm not complaining about that. But the wealth distribution and the amount of, the queen bees of this environment and all the worker ants, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And if the Zuckerbergs and the Amazon people and whoever owns Google now and all of that think that AI is just going to replace all of us, and there's going to be all this content being pushed out with ads that everyone will enjoy because it's baby videos and cat videos. People have to eat and people have to have jobs to do that. And they're not going to have time to be able to watch your cat videos all day long.
Well, and just the automotive guys, just as a brief aside on 2 things. These automotive guys, and they're almost all guys, or they were almost all guys, they didn't know how to edit video. They didn't know how to, they just invented, they said, well, we need to figure that. And that's why they were staying up late at night. They wanted to get it exactly right. They wanted to do the thing they loved, and they wanted to do it with their friends. And they were willing to relocate from New Jersey to LA to do it because it was fun. And they were car nerds. And this looked interesting. And they learned a bunch of ancillary skills to make the business work. But the core business is always, let's do fun shit that we enjoy and share it with our friends. And it's not quite the same, but it's similar. You and I did not get into blogging to make a fortune.
No.
We got in, and it was a miracle that we would type something onto a blank page and hit publish, and people would read it.
Yeah.
First dozens, and then hundreds, and then occasionally thousands of people would read what we said. That was insane. That was impossible. That was remarkable.
Yep. And I just started as a way of disciplining my writing habit. It wasn't. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm realizing, there's a whole community here. And it was in me to say, I'm going to promote other people. And that's when I got hooked up with Mike of Mike's Blog Roundup. And he told me many times, you are the most generous person with sharing. You send me other people's links all the time. Nobody else does that.
Well,
and it was just really important to me that everybody who did something good should have an audience.
Congratulations. You've looped us back to the word camaraderie.
Well, and one other thing, just I know this probably isn't the right place to insert this, but Paramount this week deleted the MTV archives.
Oh, yeah.
And they deleted the Comedy Central archive. And they did this because of greed and stupidity of people who want this Paramount stock to be higher as a cost-saving measure. And this belief, we always also had this very naive belief when we started blogging that the internet was forever and we love having archives.
Right.
And what we have now is a top layer of very wealthy vultures who will burn down the Library of Alexandria for their hedge fund.
Yes, they will. Well, before they burn it down, they're going to milk it for every dime they can get.
Yeah.
And that's the point. So,
and not pay anyone who contributed anything. The librarians there don't get paid.
No,
unless they earn $100, and we say when they earn $100.
I mean, understand. I'm not trying to apologize for the existence of corporations or the people within them. They exist in the ecosystem as a thing that is known, which is we exist to maximize profit for ourselves and our shareholders.
Right.
And it's a completely amoral construction. They don't care. The morality of what they do is irrelevant. They don't want to break any laws, which is why they're all about, getting deregulation and making sure regulations
They want the laws to conform to what they're doing.
Right. We'd like to strip away
hire Supreme Court justices.
That's right. We want to get rid of the regulations so we're technically legal. But the whole point of it is we exist to profit, to make money, to increase our bottom line, to have payouts for our shareholders. That's the only reason we exist. So you have to understand that going in, that's how corporations operate. So when you are purchased by a corporation, when you're bought out, that ethos now enters your universe.
Yep.
So whatever the hell you thought you were doing with making sick videos with your friends about burnouts and cool shit, you now are a profit center of a corporation. And that's a very different thing. So, but let's put a pin on that just for a second and talk about what the article, like the one in the New York Times, means when they use the word resistance. It has a very specific meaning, and I think it's wrong. But their meaning is right there in the headline. Anti-Trump burnout. And it's there in the first words of the first line of the article. In 2017, they donned pink hats to march on Washington. This was the Bulwark's Sarah Longwell on Morning Joe about 3 months ago. Quote, strategically, we think about this less like building a pro-Joe Biden coalition and more like building an anti-Trump coalition. So, to any casual observer, it would seem that the resistance is simply an anti-Trump thing. It was conjured into existence in the early days of Donald Trump's term in office at almost exactly the same moment that a group of recently former Republicans like Sarah Longwell and Bill Kristol and Charlie Sykes started up their own media corporation. Hey, thanks to a huge amount of promotion, free promotion they got from another large corporation, MSNBC. And almost immediately, Bulwark employees colonized cable news and took control of the quote-unquote resistance narrative. It's their narrative now. They get to decide what it means. Now, a year later, I don't think this is a coincidence in any way, another group of recently former Republicans, including John Weaver and Rick Wilson and Steve Schmidt and Reed Galen, started their own advertising company called, you might have heard of it, called the Lincoln Project. And once again, thanks to huge amount of free publicity and promotion they got from MSNBC, they raked in their first year nearly $100 million. They weren't struggling with YouTube for their first $100. They raked in nearly $100 million right off the bat, like from jump, as if no other people existed who were doing anything in that space. And they did it by producing slick ads, which titillated liberals. I called it political Pornhub for liberals, which is exactly what it was, because it never budged the needle on the 2020 election at all. It didn't accomplish anything except entertaining liberals and making them feel seen. So they gave them lots of money. And this has been the state of things ever since. It's all eyes on Trump, focus on Trump. You remember that Liz Cheney didn't want to go after anybody else in the J6 committee except Trump. He's the problem. And if you're singularly focused on Trump, then you're ignoring a bunch of other things. So years were wasted because of never-Trumper delusions that Trump was the problem, that he was some sort of passing fever, a fluke, and that once the fever broke, the party could go back to the good old days, right? That was the whole line of attack. But, Blue Gal, you and I know this, but maybe other people don't. There were no good old days to go back to. And that's the secret no one wants to talk about. And I'm going to refer now to a dirty fucking hippie named Driftglass, who wrote this in March of 2010, long before Donald Trump ever showed up. Quote, when liberals said that it would take a generation to clean up these serial catastrophes and pay down the political, economic, environmental, cultural, and karmic debts incurred by 30 years of crackpot conservative policies that reached their apotheosis, haha, little did we understand that then, under the Bush administration, we weren't being hyperbolic. We were being optimistic, unquote. Now, sadly, the result of letting recently former Republicans control the narrative is a resistance movement that is explicitly an anti-Trump movement, and which has spent a staggering amount of time and energy and money to peel off a tiny, tiny number of fence-straddling Republicans. And I know you were around when I told you this joke this week, so I'm going to repeat it for our listeners' sake. I joked this week that the largest and most expensive infrastructure project in America by far has been the building of hundreds of political off-ramps over the past 8 years to try to coax a tiny handful of idiots to change their vote and not vote for the orange fascist rapist felon. But the actual resistance, the real resistance, is much older than that, because the actual problem is not Donald Trump. The actual problem is that deep rot that we were all aware of all the way back when we were kids, practically, at the base of the Republican Party, which manifested Donald Trump. Trump didn't turn them into this. They brought him in because he was what they wanted all along. And for the record, all the damage that Republicans had done to this country up to and including the Bush administration are fucking peanuts compared to the damage the GOP has done since then.
Yep. And let's not forget, again, the corporations who use that base to, get Republicans elected so they can get Supreme Court justices put in office, so they can pass Citizens United, so they can funnel money into the system. And then the Supreme Court can say, well, it's not bribery if it's a tip.
That's right. That's right.
This is a cycle of life that has been way before Trump. Trump is banking on it and profiting from it. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe there would be no Trump without Citizens United, because the reason Trump is interested in continuing his political career is it's a money pit for him. And it's a money pit for him because there's unlimited dark money that will flow into his coffers.
Well, and like 2 days, I think it was, a day and a half, 2 days after Trump came down the escalator, mm-hmm. I was still thinking the GOP elite would write him a check for $1 billion and give him a game show.
Just to go away.
Just to go away. Yeah. But I never was in doubt that he was the perfect candidate.
No, right,
and I wrote a day after he came, like a day and a half, I forget the exact timing, but it was, the Republican Party has spent the last 30 years creating the perfect feeding ground for a grifter like this.
Absolutely.
They built the base to be this way. And he showed up and said, great, thanks for the party, guys. And they toss him the keys and we're off to the races.
You program these voters to believe a certain set of principles. And I am listening to the same media they are. I'll repeat that. And then they'll say, he's saying what I'm thinking. We better vote for him, period.
Yep.
But let's go back to the Bush years for a minute, because during the Bush years, both the mainstream media and the conservative media mocked and hated us dirty fucking hippies. I will never forget that Brian Williams and him talking about some guy in a walk-up named Vinny. And here I am with all of this experience and training to be a journalist. And some guy named Vinny with a laptop and a modem thinks he can replace me.
And you might remember Joe Scarborough talking about those Cheeto-stained...
Cheeto eatings,
dirty Cheeto-stained, T-shirts are covered with Cheeto stains, living in their mom's basement.
Right.
Bloggers who think they know better than whoever the hell he was talking about.
Yeah.
And it turned out we did.
We did. Because after Bush won in 2004, it would have been easy to feel alone and exhausted. Bush won.
Yeah. Got kicked.
But we had each other, and we had camaraderie, and we had a sense of purpose together. In the morning, you might check in with Talking Points Memo. During the day, you could listen to people like Al Franken and Rachel Maddow and Randy Rhodes and many, many others on Air America. Daily Kos was a real community then. I think it still is, but not what it was in 2004.
Nope.
They had national meetups. They had best-selling books. Steve Gilliard was still alive and cranking out 3 to 4 great posts a day. And his comment section featured Driftglass and was its own community.
Yeah, it was great. It was really...
Ditto Shakespeare's sister and her comment threads were just full of great people. Digby, Jesus General, Crooks and Liars, Atrios. Everyone had their favorite bar to hang out in.
Yeah, but we were all...
And I'm not just being nostalgic about that. It made a difference. If you were a blogger, the hours were long and the pay was nothing and next to nothing. But we shared a common purpose and a common belief that we were building something that could last. And we all knew that the problem facing our country was not just Bush and Cheney. It was their base. It was their media. It was the trajectory they were on. There was a reason John Amato called it crooks and liars.
Mm-hmm.
The crooks were the politicians, but the liars were in the media. And the purpose was to expose both of them.
Both of them, exactly.
And the whole Republican Party was broken and is broken, and it's only getting worse every day. You know, at that time, we also thought we were making something that could actually challenge the weak and complicit mainstream media.
Yeah.
That, as you might recall, was celebrating the bombs dropping.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Maybe we could shame them into doing their jobs and taking the dangerous dysfunction of the Republican Party seriously. And for a moment, if you squinted hard, you could almost see the future. It looked like we might even be making inroads on cable TV with Keith Olbermann at MSNBC and Marcos Melitsas promoting Olbermann on Daily Kos. And then Olbermann brought in Maddow from Air America, and Maddow brought in Chris Hayes, who'd been writing for the Chicago Reader, the Labor magazine in these times, and The Nation.
Mm-hmm.
And this was all good. I mean, it was just a good thing. We could see how broken the media had become, and there were actual liberals coming to work on cable news. And we understood how critical a healthy media was to a healthy democracy. It was important that somebody out there was telling the truth, especially about the war at the time.
Yeah. And there was just such an ocean of people out there who weren't on blogs, weren't aware that we existed, weren't listening to Air America, who were still just deluded about the nature of the country. Mm-hmm. And we knew that we couldn't talk to them, but the New York Times reached those people, the Washington Post reached those people, the LA Times, the Tribune, that the mainstream media still had a big audience, that network television still had a big audience. And if we could just push them in the direction of reporting honestly about the nature of the problems facing our country and the problems with the Republican Party, we might just pull something off. It wouldn't be us, but we could influence them enough that they felt shame enough or pride enough in their journalism that they want to do a good job and want to tell the truth. But then it all began to kind of falter. And
we're going to do a little mini history of how it began to falter.
Yeah.
And if you've heard all of this from Driftglass's blog, and this is old news to you because we have talked about it on more than one occasion, feel free to skip over. But we think it's important. And it is something that first of all, other people don't talk about, and everybody's going to be talking about the debate, and we wanted to do something a little different. So take it away, Driftglass.
Well, like I said, at the time you could kind of feel it. It felt like an irregular heartbeat that just suddenly started, and suddenly things didn't feel right. Things felt off. The Republican Party we knew was not going to change. That's just not going to happen. It's baked in. It was going to dig in, double down, and become a cult. And the mainstream media wasn't going to change either. Instead, it turned itself into the blame both sides reporting cult. Mm-hmm. You know, it became a cult of both sides do it, led by Pope David Brooks. Mm-hmm. And that little glimmer of light at MSNBC began to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And for example, on February 18th, 2012, Melissa Harris Perry was hired by MSNBC. And we all went, yeah, excellent. They put her on the weekends. She was great. She brought on a lot of subject matter that had never been touched by the network that was really important and interesting. She was a great host. And then this is from 4 years later, February 28th, 2016, in the Washington Post. Quote, MSNBC severs ties with Melissa Harris Perry after host's critical email. MSNBC has parted ways with host Melissa Harris Perry after she complained about preemptions of her weekend program and implied that there was a racial aspect to the cable news network's treatment, insiders at MSNBC said. Harris Perry refused to appear on her program Saturday morning, telling her coworkers that in an email that she felt worthless to the NBC-owned network. I will not be used as a tool for their purposes, wrote Harris Perry, who is African-American. Quote, I am not a token, mammy, or little brown bobblehead. I am not owned by NBC executives or MSNBC. I love our show, and I want it back, unquote.
Now, this was at the same time, and it might have even been the same day, that MSNBC hired Rick Tyler. Hired him. Uh-huh. He'd been Ted Cruz's comms director just a few days before. And now he's an MSNBC hire. I think people do forget that. This is from NBC News, February 22nd, 2016. Cruz asks communications director Rick Tyler to resign Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz has asked for the resignation of his communications director, Rick Tyler, following the distribution of a video that falsely depicted his rival Marco Rubio dismissing the Bible. Tyler apologized to the Florida senator Sunday night, calling the attack inaccurate. The departure comes just 2 days after Cruz's disappointing third-place finish in the South Carolina primary and marks the highest-level staff shakeup to date for his campaign. It also reflects genuine concern among the Cruz camp that accusations of dirty tricks are beginning to stick and damage the Texas senator's presidential prospects, unquote.
Yeah, how'd that work out, Ted? So Tyler's kicked out because you got to blame somebody. And, days later, he's swept up by MSNBC. Now, during the spring and summer, you might remember, of that year, MSNBC had Hugh Hewitt, about whom I have written many, many things, and about whom we all know is a cyborg sent from the future to destroy America. They had Hugh Hewitt, who's terrible, warming up in the MSNBC bullpen. This is from April 21st, 2016, when Steve Kornacki had Hewitt on to announce that it was impossible for Donald Trump to reach the number of delegates he needed for the nomination in time for the convention, which, didn't turn out to be true. In June of 2016, Hugh Hewitt was on with Brian Williams. You remember Brian Williams, Blue Gal? Remember him? And Hewitt was explaining, quote, he agrees with Rachel Maddow and James Carville on Trump's Tuesday speech was tin-eared, unquote. And then this is from MSNBC on July 2nd, 2016. This has all happened really fast, by the way. And this was why it was so dispiriting to watch it in real time. Conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt joins MSNBC's Alex Witt to explain his shift from comparing the acceptance of a Trump nomination to, quote, ignoring stage 4 cancer, unquote, to writing a Trump endorsement in the Washington Post, unquote. Finally, 5 months after Donald Trump was sworn in June of 2017, quote, MSNBC give conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt a show. The commentator is joining MSNBC's Sunday morning lineup, a move that is sure to raise eyebrows at the network and among its left-leaning fans, unquote. No shit, Sherlock. And that fiasco lasted about a year. Hewitt was fired in June of 2017.
Some people might complain that we're leaning too far to the right with their ad campaign.
Yeah, they had a whole thing.
In January of 2017, with great fanfare and a huge personal push by Rachel Maddow, who had her on the air and told her she loved her, MSNBC gave Greta Van Susteren her own show, which launched on January 9th, 2017, and she lasted 6 months. 6 whole months.
Uh-huh.
This is from the New York Times, January 2nd, 2017. Quote, Megyn Kelly is leaving Fox News for NBC. What could possibly go wrong, Dick Grass?
We're just going to keep doing this until we get it right, Blue Gal.
Yeah. Megyn Kelly, she's got ratings. She arrived at Fox News 12 years ago as a television news neophyte, but rose to become one of its 2 biggest stars, has decided to leave the network to take a bunch of money. No, to take a broad new role at NBC News for an undisclosed salary. NBC announced Tuesday afternoon the NBC News chairman, Andrew Lack, genius, not, wooed Ms. Kelly away from Fox News by offering her a triple role and also a triple paycheck, in which she will host her own daytime news and discussion program, anchor an in-depth Sunday night news show, and take regular part in the network's special political programming and other big event coverage. The move will herald a seismic shift in the cable news landscape, where Ms. Kelly had become the second most watched host after Bill O'Reilly of Fox News, and often helped define the national political debate, especially over the last year as Donald J. Trump regularly attacked her, at times in viciously personal terms, unquote.
Yeah. And a brief aside, Megyn Kelly is now back to groveling for Trump's approval. And on her
podcast.
On her podcast. On her little podcast.
Yeah.
This is from the AP a year and a half later. You all might know this already, so don't be surprised when I tell you, quote, NBC cancels Megyn Kelly's show after blackface controversy. Yay! Megyn Kelly, the former Fox News Channel personality, who made a rocky transition to softer news at NBC, was fired from her morning show Friday after triggering a furor by suggesting that it was okay for white people to wear blackface at Halloween, unquote. And she kept all the money. So she got all the benefits and none of the downside, and out she went.
I'm telling you something. If you paid me Megyn Kelly money to go away, I'd go away.
I'd stay away. You'd never hear from me again. Well, we might, but it'd be snarky, and it'd be from the south of France.
Or a cruise ship someplace, yeah.
Yeah.
And who could forget what happened over at the Peacock just a few months ago? From the New York Times, March 27th of this year. Quote, for the past week, the best drama on NBC, apologies to Dick Wolf, has been in the news department. On Friday, NBC News announced that it was hiring Ronna McDaniel, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, as a political analyst. By Sunday morning, Kristen Welker was grilling Ms. McDaniel on Meet the Press, after which the former host, Chuck Todd, told his successor on air that their bosses owe you an apology. By Monday morning, the hosts of MSNBC's Morning Joe condemned the hire. By Monday night, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow likened it to hiring, quote, a mobster to work at a DA's office. And by Tuesday, Ms. McDaniel was officially out as an NBC News contributor, having lasted not even a half Scaramucci, unquote.
Yeah. And what we've learned from this, what did we learn from this, kids? Is you have to infiltrate Republicans and people that your audience hates into your newses slowly. You can't just dump them in there. But even when you do ease them in, I mean, the only reason I hired Megyn Kelly, who we hated, I mean, the NBC despised her, audiences despised her, was ratings, was money. We want to get a bunch of more people to watch our crappy commercials so that our ratings will go up, so we'll be paid more. And she'll bring people over who are fans of hers, who will pay to watch her on our TV show. That's the only reason they brought her over, and the only reason they paid her an insane amount of money. Mm-hmm. And it was never going to work. And anybody who knew better could have told them that. But remember, they didn't ask the car guys their opinion.
Right.
They wanted to know about the profit center and the synergies and the profit and the synergies. So they brought over this person who they believed could jack up the ratings, despite the fact that it shit all over everything they had been building for years. Mm-hmm. And they didn't care because shmoney. Now, here's the thing. We are the resistance, and we are not exhausted because we never had any illusions about getting rid of one guy would solve the problem. That will not solve the problem because I overwrote this just a little bit, but like orchards and cathedrals, our democracy has been the work of generations. Mm-hmm. And fixing the damage that Republicans have done to our country will still take decades. There's no doubt about that in my mind. It's maddening, but we never really expected any better from them. We knew who they were. We've known who they were all along. And now that the party has been stripped of all the pretense it ever had about giving a damn about deficits or ethics or personal responsibility or all that bullshit, the only thing Republicans ever really cared about is now painfully clear.
I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you. And I wish to go on hurting you.
That's all they care about. Making liberals cry. That's it. Nothing more than that. They're hollow. That's all they care about. And this is what we on the left have been saying all along, which is why we're not exhausted, but the media does completely exasperate us by how much effort the media puts into remaining willfully blind to how bad things have gotten, how committed the media is to the cult of both sides do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I noticed this exchange a few days on Twitter, and it sums up exactly what you're saying, Driftglass. James Fallows noted how Axios and then the New York Times framed similar news. The Axios headline is Trump's underwhelming business support, which is very straightforward.
Yeah, and clear and factual.
For Axios, yes.
Yeah.
The New York Times headline was grudgingly, many at top in business back Biden. Executives have not abandoned the president en masse for Trump. Yet.
What did Laura mean last night when she said, I haven't slept with him yet? Yet. What does yet mean anyway? It means you're going to do it, doesn't it? Or does it?
If you haven't seen High Fidelity yet, see it now. This was the response from Meredith Garcia on Twitter. Quote, because at the New York Times, everything, no matter how good, is bad for Biden. I am so sick of this, unquote.
Yeah.
And I quote tweeted her and said, this is the real liberal burnout.
Yep.
We're so sick of it.
Absolutely sick of it. And it's been going on so long. That's why we're exasperated, because they've been this bad for a very long time, long before Trump. In fact, being this bad is one of the reasons we fucking have Trump, because that's how they operate, because of the both sides do it, savvy pundit school of journalism. And, you know, a shared purpose, a sense of shared purpose can get you through a lot. And I had that, as Blue Gal alluded to, over my career a few times. The suits came in and wrecked it every time, but I had for a little while when I was working at Columbia College. It was long hours, it was real short pay, but I had a committed crew of genius geeks, and we had after-hour hangouts that broke the rules and were a ton of fun. I loved working with those people. They were great people, and they were smart, and they were weird, and they were my crew. They were my tribe. I also had a little bit of that when I worked at the city of Chicago. It's a longer story than I want to tell today, but we ended up with the entire management crew gone except for 3 of us. 12 people were there one day, 3 people the next, and I was one of the 3. And we had to learn really fast to do things on an ad hoc basis. We ran up the Jolly Roger, and we did stuff that we never thought we'd get a chance to do because no one was looking over our shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you've never felt part of that kind of team where you're doing something you all believe in and you actually trust your teammates, I really do pity you, because it's exhilarating. It doesn't last very long, but it's exhilarating, and it's defined by camaraderie, that you can all trust each other, that you're all there for each other. And back during the before time, there was that kind of camaraderie on the left.
Mm-hmm.
There was a real sense, from the inroads we made on cable news to the lowliest fuck you, fuck Bush blogger, that we were kind of a team. And we were making progress. We were pulling it more or less the same direction. We were saltier then. And we painted with brighter colors then, because we could feel our momentum and we could see the results in front of us. We could see where we were moving. And then the goddamn suits moved in and decided that to be even more profitable, what MSNBC really needed was more Republicans to provide more viewers for the corporations that pay the bills. So where the spirit of our little liberal outpost on cable TV once felt like this.
Play La Marseillaise. Play it.
Now, God damn it feels like this.
The little pill with a big story to tell.
I apologize for that last audio.
I know. I could. That's my artistic license, and I couldn't help myself. But and lest you be left with a sense of despair, that's not what we're trying to do. Because you know what's happening right now? Moms Demand Action is happening right now, and they're going strong.
And last week, I attended a Moms Demand Action postcard party.
Yeah,
where we wrote 300 postcards to voters in Ohio that will be mailed in October, but they're all stamped and ready to go to registered Democrats in Ohio. To get them not only to get out the vote, but to talk to their friends and family and get them to, we mentioned specifically in the postcards, you may be ready to vote, but maybe your friends aren't. Please talk to your friends. Please tell them how important this election is. Yeah. And ask them as their friend to get out and vote.
Yeah. And
we're hoping that has, dropping a rock in the stream and has that kind of impact. And then the other thing, Dirk Flash, you said to me, why we're spending all this infrastructure money on building off-ramps for Republican voters to come home and, vote for sanity again, so to speak, right?
Yeah, right.
Which, I'm sorry, if you voted for George H.W. Bush and Bush twice, you've already got a problem with me.
Right. That's right.
But we have to pull you back from voting for Trump twice, and then you'll be free to start a new Tea Party movement called the Coffee Party. You can wear coffee filters on your head and complain about the deficit. It's just and this was the thing in 2017 when Trump was elected and Trump was inaugurated, and we did the Women's March and so forth. What did you and I do in March of 2017? No more rebranding.
That's right.
Republican Party, you own this. No Tea Party, no third way, no labels. When Trump goes down, and we know he will, you don't get to rebuild on some astroturfed bullshit.
No, I branded my blog.
That movement is coming. It's still coming. They're planning on it.
I stuck at the bottom of.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I stuck at the bottom of. Started sticking at the bottom of my blog. So I still blog. It's 20 years later. I'm still blogging. Burn the lifeboats.
Burn the lifeboats.
Burn the lifeboats. Do not let these people back on board.
People start another political movement. And fortunately for humanity, Donald Trump is bankrupting that infrastructure. But don't think for a minute there isn't another $1 billion from rich people to come in, because we need our tax cuts next time. It's going to be a constant fight, and we don't give up. Because
let me just be clear. I just want to mention that people like Stuart Stevens have my attention. They're sincere. They wrote a book called It's All a Lie. I get it. And I believe he's sincere when he does this. But from the very beginning, my problem was with letting recently former Republicans take control of the liberal narrative, the liberal media narrative, and define who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, who gets let in, who gets let out, where the money goes, who's going to get promotion on the air, who's going to get touted, who's going to get book deals, who's going to get the profit from all of this energy. Was that in the back of their minds, I swear to God, they still have this delusion that they're going to get the Republican Party back. I heard Stuart Stevens say the same thing. We need a center-right party in this country. So, in 2035 or 2030, whenever it's going to be, we have to have a few people around who can, form. And I'm like, dude, first of all, we have a center-right party. It's called the Democrats.
Yes.
Have you paid attention to the Democrats? Democrats are not socialists. Democrats are not communists. By any global standard, that's a conservative party.
How many veterans, how many military veterans are in the House and Senate Democratic caucuses right now?
Yeah.
Our Senator, Tammy Duckworth, is not soft on the military.
No. And this is not where I want the party to be, but this is where it is. But there's still this fantasy that we're going to get the party back, and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and 5 of their friends are going to have costumes in a barn. They're going to put on a show. They're going to call it the New Republican Party. It's all going to be fine. And that's never going to happen, because there is no material left for you to build a party out of. So once they started controlling the narrative, it became impossible for anyone else to get in there and say, no, you're doing it wrong. You see, we didn't lose our party. You lost your party. We didn't burn the fucking place down. You burned the place down. We are not the arsonists. You're the arsonists, and the only reason you're crashing on our couch now is because you burned your own house down. And now you're homeless and looking for a place to land. And I resent the fact that our movement got taken over by a bunch of people who don't like our movement very much.
Yeah.
And they did it for profit. And I don't doubt, again, Stuart Stevens, people like his sincerity, but this desire to increase audience share at any cost and bring people in who clearly hated us. I mean, Joe Scarborough fucking hates liberals, and now he's got 4 hours in the morning. That was a mistake. That was a strategic mistake. And maybe it was just inevitable. Maybe no matter what you do, eventually the guys with money and suits are going to show up and take it all away from you. But we want you to know that we're still here. The resistance is still here. And we're not tired. We're not exhausted. We're just pissed that the media can't get it through its fucking head that they are in danger too.
Yeah. This is their problem, and I think we'll end on that. Drift Glass, it's 54:18. We're gonna skip the news roundup and add it to the news roundup for next week.
Fair enough.
We made an executive decision that we're going to do that.
Fair enough. It's late, and there's a debate coming on, I understand, in like an hour and a half.
In a few minutes. So each week we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is actually a pool-hustling boxer dog named Dallas. Dallas would like to play you double or nothing for your freshly poured pet food. Whether you serve Pet Store Perfection or Dollar Store Drek, your pool hustler dog will sit in the pool hall and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured.
Freshly poured, oh my Lord, it's freshly poured.
And you can visit Dallas at our Facebook page or website, proleftpod.com, and you can send your Internet Kitty dog or other pet to us just send us a picture of them. They can be silly pictures. We love them. At our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise.
Don't forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage or any other kind of beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not a charity. This is our job. We're not one of the suits. We don't have a bucket of money. If you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/proleftpod. And please share our show on social media. That actually does help out an awful lot. And if you love this podcast, please get someone else to listen to it. And we really do appreciate for doing that. And thank you.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, this week, Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties would like to thank the good people at Coble Animal Hospital for taking good care of Bosco, who can be a handful.
And Bosco's doing great.
He's doing fine.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.